All right, 6:30. All right, tonight, you guys that are here are in for a treat. I want to talk to you about one of the most powerful frameworks that you can use to understand everyday life, and more importantly, to help you understand what the future is going to be like in this current world. It's called the Cynefin framework. So far, the frameworks we've talked about are: what is a project? A project has a beginning and end. We talked about decision quality, frame, alternatives, information, values and trade-offs, logic and reasoning, commitment to action. And we've also talked about team development, forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And today we're going to expand it to the Cynefin framework. As I like to do with these frameworks, we're going to start from a biblical point of view, and we're going to talk about in the frame of Israel's story in the wilderness. So it starts with Exodus, where God delivers Israel from slavery in Egypt. You've got the plagues, the Passover, all this kind of thing. You've got the covenant at Sinai, where the Ten Commandments are, and then there's the tabernacle instructions. And then the Bible goes into Leviticus, which are the laws for worship, sacrifice, holiness, and priesthood, and less about journeying and more about how to live as God's people. Then we get into Numbers, which is the organization of the tribes. The reason it's called Numbers is because it begins and ends with a census. And then you've got spies sent to the promised land. They refuse to enter. And then that's when we enter the 40 years of wandering for Israel. Deuteronomy is Moses' farewell speech. It reviews everything they've done to date, reviews the law and God's faithfulness. And then Joshua is the transition point. Joshua is where we cross the Jordan and the conquest of the land begins. It's a fascinating story. But let's talk about how this fits into the Cynefin framework. And we'll start with clear rules and guidance. So there are parts of the Bible where God gives very clear rules and guidance. For example, Exodus 12, 7 and 11. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and the tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It's the Lord's Passover. Passover, very straightforward command with very clear if-then rules. Do this and you will be spared. Next, let's talk about the tabernacle. In Exodus 31, 1 through 5, then the Lord said to Moses, "See, I have chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Ur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs for working gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of craft." God goes in great detail to Moses about how to build this tabernacle. Great detail. And more importantly, to fill out this complicated concept, it requires craftsmen with specialized skill and knowledge. Okay, next, this concept of depending on trust and relationship. So there are seasons when outcomes couldn't be predicted in advance. In Numbers 9:17, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tent, the Israelites set out. Whenever the cloud settled, the Israelites encamped. So they would wander the desert, and whenever this cloud, which appeared as a cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night appeared, that's where they'd stop. And whenever it disappeared, they packed up and moved. It could be first thing in the morning, could be 2 in the afternoon, could be midnight. They didn't know. They just had to grow their trust in God. Then there were clear chaotic moments. So let's back up to Exodus 14, 10 through 12. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" People were in panic mode. Okay? Chaotic. And then disorder. Exodus 32:1, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come make us gods who will go before us. And for this fellow, Moses, who brought us out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Total disorder. This is when they turn back to idols. So how does this fit into our Cynefin framework? So the Cynefin framework looks like this. And on the one side, you've got predictability. On the other side, you've got unpredictability. And each one of these quadrants matter. Simple is the bottom right. So simple is what we'd say is a one variable if-then concept, right? If it's raining outside and you go outside, you'll get wet. If-then concept. Very straightforward, nothing complex about it. Similar to, if I knocked this cup off the table, it would fall to the ground. Single variable, single consequence. Then we get to complicated, right? So think about the tabernacle, more complicated, more multivariables, right? The difference between knocking this cup off the counter versus launching a rocket, an unmanned rocket, into space. Lots of variables go into where that rocket will wind up, how much thrust you need to put on it, but fundamentally, it can be solved with math. That's what complicated is, which is great. But this is where most of what we're going to talk about lands, which is complex. Complex is when the variables change. And what usually makes a system complex is when we introduce humans into the mix. So for example, I know if I run at a certain pace, I can finish a mile in 9 minutes. However, I don't know if I'm going to win a race if I'm going against other people, right? And more importantly, me speeding up may cause my competitors to speed up. Or me speeding up in the beginning may cause them to speed up in the beginning and become tired. Or me going slow in the beginning may cause them to go faster in the beginning, but we're way too far behind. It is a complex concept where variables change in the model. You cannot just mathematically decide what's going to happen. And chaotic. Chaotic is when it's even worser, right? It's even when you don't even know the formula. When you don't even know that you're running a race, it's chaos. And the final one is disorder, when you don't even know which frame you're in. You could be in simple or complicated or complex. You don't even know. That's what disorder is. So the examples we got to, disorder was when they were waiting for Moses and they asked Aaron to build them new idols. Simple, explicit instructions for Passover. Very clear, do this and you're fine. Complicated, building the tabernacle. It's complicated, but there's a formula, but you need help. Complex, following the cloud. You don't know when the cloud's going to change. You have no idea. All you know is you have to pack up and move. And then finally, chaotic, parting the Red Sea. Soldiers behind you, sea in front of you, you don't know what to do. All of a sudden the sea is parted and you run. But all that matters is if you know the value of all these frames is what you do with them. So it's one thing to know what frame you're in, but what's even more important is to know what to do about being in that frame. So if you're in simple, real straightforward. Sense, categorize, respond. See what's going on, categorize, respond. It's raining outside, I don't want to get wet, I grab an umbrella. Complicated, a little bit more difficult. Sense, analyze, respond. Because then you have to do some thinking. It's not something you've seen 1,000 times before, it's not a single variable. You have to do some analyzing, you have to think a little bit more about all the variables involved. Complex, probe, sense, respond. You have to start testing the water. If I'm running that race, if I'm about to run that race, maybe I talk to some of my competitors. Maybe I talk to some of the coaches. I try and understand what the possible outcomes would be. Chaotic, you just got to act. Act, and then see how it's going, and then respond. And your only priority in disorder is to figure out where you are. That is the number one priority, and then you can do these other ones. So let's take this and make it a much more practical example, and let's talk about travel. Just flying in general. So let's drill down on one of these here. Simple. You're at TSA security. The rules are well known. You remove liquids over 3 ounces. You take laptops out, boarding pass in hand. You've got the signs everywhere. You've got people that know what you do. All you have to do is listen to what they say. Sense, categorize, respond. I sense I'm in line for the TSA. Categorize, I've done this 1,000 times. Respond, take my laptop out, walk through the line. Rules are clear, don't overthink, just follow the standard. All right, complicated. Complicated would be a layover delay. Your connecting flight's canceled due to a mechanical issue. Rebooking isn't straightforward because you need to make an international connection. So you're going to sense, analyze, respond. Gather information, what flights are available, what connection exists, what's the deadline, analyze. You could use an export resource, you could do gate agent, airline app, whatever. Respond, select the best alternative. So when the solution is obvious, seek expertise before acting. Complex. This is where it gets a little bit harder. A storm has delayed multiple flights and no one knows exactly when planes will take off. The situation's evolving. So you probe, you try small actions, you check multiple acts, you ask the staff, you share information with other people. What responses do you get? Are you saying, hey, I found out the United app's pretty good, or hey, I found out that the Yahoo travel is doing terrible right now? You're sensing what's going on, and you respond. You adjust as clarity emerges. What about chaos? Chaos is emergency in the terminal, right? Absolute chaos. What's going on? Emergency sounds. People are running. No one knows what's happening. You act, respond. The first thing you're going to do in an emergency, you're going to act. You're going to move. You're going to get somewhere safe. And then once stable, then you assess what's going on, and then you respond. And then finally, disorder. Let's say you land in a totally foreign airport. There's nothing, no English signs anywhere. You don't know what's going on. No one's speaking English, and none of the signs make sense. Some say customs, some say transit, some point to baggage claim, and you have no idea what applies to you. So your response pattern, first, break it down. Recognize you don't know what category you're in. Ask yourself, is this routine? Does this require an expert? Is this predictable, unpredictable? And then move forward. Ask staff, check with lines. Remember, the whole point right here is to figure out what frame you're in to figure out how to respond. Okay, so this is Cynefin framework by Snowden, 2007. I think the most powerful part of this is to really think about what your future is going to be like. So as you move on, you think about what jobs you're going to have. All of my kids, 2 of my kids are in college, 2 of my kids are in high school, one's a 10-year-old, he's having fun. But for the ones in college and high school, they need to know what jobs am I going to be able to do when I leave. For example, my youngest daughter really loves English. But what future is there in writing? I don't know. I would say AI is going to take over a lot of writing. It's already taken over a lot of my writing. Here's what I'd say. Simple calculators, perfect for simple. Absolutely perfect. Complicated, computers and AI, great for complicated. They manage it just fine. Complex, there is no AI that can handle complex yet. I don't even see it coming. And even if it does, you still have chaotic and disorder. So those are 2 places where, at least 3 places, where for the foreseeable future, humans will have a role. So what I'd recommend to you as you're going to the workforce, as you're building out your skills, it's okay to spend some of your early time in these. There's nothing wrong with it, especially if it's something like you're not going to be replaced by a large language model anytime soon, like plumbing. That's not going to replace us anytime soon. That's a simple job. It's a great job. And sometimes it could even be complicated. But when it comes to digital work, we have to acknowledge that it's definitely coming a time where the simple and the complicated will be taken away from us. And we, as humans, need to move more into this space and treat this as tools to make these easier, but we still need to do these. That is the Cynefin framework. Thoughts, questions, observations? Sir?
What jobs would you say would fit into, so we get plumbing for the simple one. What jobs, or I guess simple and complicated a little bit. What jobs specifically would you say would fit into complex chaotic disorder?
It is all about dealing with people. The number one way to make any system complex is to put people in it. That is the number one way to do it, because people change. People change all the time, and then systems of people are even more difficult, right? Economics, I think that there's this push that AI will start taking over economics, but if you look at the history of stock prices and things like that, as soon as someone figures out a system, somebody figures out a way to exploit it. It is a complex situation. And there may come a point where the AI is one step faster than us, but there will still be humans in the system that'll continue to make it complex. So I would say that's the number one thing to do here. Chaotic, you're really looking at first responder type stuff. You're never going to send an AI to fix a fire in a house. It's not going to be in the near future. It may happen, but I don't see in the near future when some kind of chaos happens. Think about the stuff going on in Minneapolis right now. Can you imagine saying, oh, we'll just let the AI take care of it? I can't see a world in our lifetimes where you just send some kind of robot to take care of that. So I would say this is your first responders. This is any calm situation that deals with people. And this could be any time. I would say this is a big one because this is where leaders go, because leaders get to funnel it one way or the other. If I'm a leader and I see a problem and I know it's simple, boom. If I'm a leader and I know it's complicated, send it to AI. If I'm a leader and I know it's complex, send it to somebody that can either fix it or make it less complex to send it to complicated.
So basically, jobs that make you deal with people are complex.
That's the most common. There'll be other ones forever, but the most common and easiest ones to understand is people make systems complex.
sales and everything will fall.
Sales, but even think more broadly, right?
For the doctors.
Subway systems. Subway systems are incredible. More city transportation systems, incredibly complex. Think about every I-10 expansion Houston's done for the past few decades, right? What happens? We think it's going to be better by expanding it, and what happens? More people move further out, which makes I-10 more crowded. It is a complex. How do you really solve the problem of transit in Houston? I don't know. It's incredibly complex. And it's not as simple as just make the road bigger, because clearly that has been shown to fail over and over again. And making the road bigger is complicated. It's not even simple. It's complicated. And it's failed every time it's tried.
It can be a way that can be two at the same time.
If it's two at the same time, you're probably in disorder. Yeah. Or you're moving from one to the other. So a good way to move from complex to complicated is to start narrowing down on the variables or start eliminating the variables that are complicated, or excuse me, complex. And so, for example, if you're dealing with a two-person system, we can all acknowledge that's complex. But if I can start asking you questions of what you're going to do. For example, my commute to work, lots of complex things happen the whole time. I don't know where this guy in front of me is going to go. I don't know where this guy behind me is going to go. I'm going to go around this truck and I'm going to try and merge left, and he's going to try and merge, right, and he's going to try and merge left at the same time. So the way we make it less complex is we use things like turn signals. We use things like the horn to communicate with each other, to remove complexity and move it to a complicated system. Okay? So I would say situations can actually move between borders, no problem. But if you ever think you're in two at the same time, you're probably in disorder. Thanks. Any other thoughts?
I've just seen a video recently, if you don't know about the Waymo cars. which are
Of course I do, yeah.
Yeah, and it was there on the railway track, and it was blocked, and there was a passenger inside. That they had to get out because there was a train coming.
Yeah. Waymo is a fascinating one for me. So it was before COVID, maybe almost a decade ago, I was in Phoenix and I saw my very first Waymo. And for those who haven't been to Phoenix, Phoenix is very predictable. You talk about a simple system, Phoenix, especially downtown Phoenix, very simple. It's flat, the roads are wide, they're all straight, it's all squares. If you looked at it from above, it would be how you would design a city for Waymo. Incredible. Over the past 3 or 4 years, I've seen Waymo in Austin, and downtown Austin is the exact opposite of Phoenix. It is chaos and organically built and hills everywhere and blind corners. And so to me, that is amazing. But it still shows that even in that, as they're trying to reduce the complexity to make the Waymo possible, there are still situations that are going to be complex because humans are involved. So I don't know. It's a bit like with the self-driving cars. We're in this weird spot in between where they make so much sense and they're going to be so nice when everybody has one. But as long as there's humans in the system, you're going to have things like parking on railroad tracks, or you're going to have things like phantom stops and all this kind of complexity that we have now. So it is definitely a spot where you've got people spending a lot of money trying to reduce the complex to the complicated. So what's the real problem? So I suspect that the way large language models work is they try to predict based on who you are, what you're going to say next. And that's what a bit of the complicated to complex does if we graph a distribution curve and we say 96% of the people are going to react this way to this situation. 96% of the people are going to hit the brakes when a red light comes on. But there's that 4% of the people that are going to blow through it. I saw a guy this morning blow through a red light because he was the only person on the road. And I respected him because he was the only person on the road and he knew what he was doing. But at the same time, that is not a predictable situation. He just drove. And so that is the problem. As computers or anything try to reduce the complex to the complicated, they're using distribution curves to assume this is what most people do. And they're right 96% of the time. The problem is when you talk about something like driving, being wrong 4% of the time could result in death. And so you have to really dial in the safety. And that's why you've got them driving overly conservative. And that's what makes it tough right now. That's a great question. Okay, any other thoughts? Sir.
I see that analysis only in the complicated quadrant.
Yes.
I think in every decision we only analyze it to alternative.
No disagreement. No disagreement. You're going to look at alternatives, all that kind of thing. The reason this framework works, though, is let's just compare these two. Sense, categorize, respond. In a simple situation, it's most likely something you've encountered a whole bunch of times before. So you don't need to spend as much time analyzing it. For example, let's go back to my simple example. It's raining outside. I want to go outside. I don't want to get wet. I'll use an umbrella. You could sit there all day long and say, I could use an umbrella. I could wait 10 minutes. But that's just not the most efficient way to handle the situation. The most efficient way to handle the situation is sense it. This is what's going on. Categorize. This is the way I've done it 100 times before. Respond. Go. You could absolutely analyze. Similarly up here with complex, the problem is analysis will never lead you to the right answer. Because no matter how much analysis you do, there are variables that will change as you execute. So back to my racing example, you could analyze all day, but if I just run 3 seconds faster, if I take this lane, you can just analyze it to death. But no matter what you do, when you actually execute it, somebody will change the outcome, for good or for worse. And so that's why over-analysis doesn't do much in this state. And then the same thing here. In a chaotic situation, think chaotic, think danger. If you spend a lot of time analyzing in a dangerous situation, bad things happen. So that's why this one is specific to analyze, because it's the most effective in this quadrant. That's not to say stop thinking ever. That's not what it's saying. It does come back to this, and we won't talk about this frame, but there's this concept of thinking one and thinking two, right? Slow brain and quick brain, if you've ever heard of that. And slow brain is where you analyze, you think through the situation, take time, whereas quick brain is, oh man, I gotta do this right now. So there's a little bit of that too. Okay? All right, sir?
What is the primary difference between analysis and probing?
Yeah, so the difference between analysis is if I gave you some model that had 20 different variables that you could calculate, that's analysis. There is a definite answer to a problem. So it's more, if you have 2 variables, you can have 2 equations, you can solve the problem. If you have 4 variables and 4 equations, you can solve the problem. If you have 20 variables and 20 equations, you can solve the problem. That's analysis, right? Whereas probing is, you've got 20 variables and 2 equations. You will never, if you spend the rest of your life analyzing it, you will never know the outcome. You will never be able to categorize all 20 of those variables. It's just not going to happen.
So this would just be to take an assessment of all of the things that could change and be aware of that.
Exactly. So probing is the situation where maybe let's go back to running the race. I'm running the race. Maybe I speed up and I see how you respond, and I watch what you do, and maybe I change where I'm running or I change my style and I see which. Another one would be boxing. Boxing would be a great example too. Whereas you don't know all the outcomes, but if you study the guy and then you throw a feint and what does he do, and you start probing to see what they do, that's much better than analyzing, because you can analyze all day, but until you're actually fighting the guy, you don't know how he's actually going to respond.